because I am really challenging myself and I'm really troubled about what I'm writing that I'm not happy.
In 2006, Paul Haggis became the first screenwriter to win back-to-back Academy Awards for writing both Million Dollar Baby and Crash. The London, Ontario native also received numerous nominations and awards for his writing work on Clint Eastwood's films, as well as the James Bond film Casino Royale. We met at the editing facility in New York City, where he was cutting his latest movie.
When you first started out, my understanding is that you were fashion photography was what you were interested in. Is that true?
Well, I fashioned myself after a fashion photographer. I was in art school,
yeah,
and I'd seen Blow Up.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, so I decided
you wanted to be David Hemming.
Exactly. So I went to England to become a fashion photographer. I'd been studying photography at H.B. Beale Secondary School in art school in London, Ontario, and fell in love with photography, and then decided I should go fall in love with models. It worked well for about 6 months.
And then you came back.
Went broke, came back, exactly.
Okay, all right. And you did cinematography at Fanshawe, is that right?
I did, yes.
Yeah.
I opened and practically closed their cinematography department. It was only running for about 3 years. I was there for 1 year of it. And it was fun. It was great. It really introduced me to film. And there was an editor who came in, Bernie Stone, who came in from New York. And just for 2 weeks and sat with us, and I learned more from him in those 2 weeks than I had previously. I just absolutely fell in love with that part of the.
I thought that was interesting because those two things are both visually oriented things,
yes.
And yet when you took off at what 22, you left to go to Hollywood.
Yes.
And what you went into was writing.
Well, I'd always loved writing, and I figured if I was going to direct, I'd have to write my own stuff.
Right.
It took me a long time to get there.
Well, you've said, and I find this intriguing too, you've spent a lot of years in the TV racket,
yes,
doing a lot of programs that people would recognize.
Yes.
But you have said on more than one occasion
yes.
that you considered it all bad.
Oh, no, it wasn't bad material. I was just a bad writer. I was very lucky to be working on those shows. But I spent many years earning a good living as a bad writer. And was very grateful for the work.
But doesn't that again, you're making a good living as a bad writer.
Yes.
Doesn't that sort of reinforce the nature of the writing after a while? Thinking, well, this is, if the bar is to here, this is only as high as I have to go.
We all tried to be good.
Yeah.
And I thought I was good. I just wasn't. It just took a long time for me to understand what writing was. Some people are thicker than others, and I'm quite dense.
You had said that, and I was in my 40s when 30-something came along, but my son, I had my son when I was 43, so I could actually identify with it even though I was in my 40s, and I liked it a lot. You have said that was a turning point for you in terms of writing. Was it a turning point?
30-something was, it was sort of a pivotal moment in my career. It was the first time that I'd really tried to write real characters. Before that, I'd written jokes, situation comedies, or situations I would write. It was always about the craft, how to make something funny, or if I was writing screenplays, it was how to make something scary, or how to create an effect of some sort. It was only when working with Marshall Herskowitz and Ed Zwick on 30-something that I realized that your writing should be about something, and you should probably start looking inside for some of those questions, if not the answers.
Well, in fact, they just recently, in fact, the first season of 30-something came out, and I bought it, and there's a section where the writers got to talk, and you were one of them. Right. And I have a quote here from you. I want to ask you about this too, because you said the thing about the show was that it celebrated the small moments of life and found drama in the tiniest of things.
Yes.
Which was, I guess, what you meant when you were just talking about it a second ago, that you were.
Marshall and Ed were very good at this. They rather than taking a large scenario and a kidnapping, a murder, the crime of the week, they looked at what the dramas in our lives were, and in this case, it was the pilot was, should we get a babysitter or not?
Yeah.
Are we ready to have a babysitter? And then the drama that surrounded that, because of course that was very real and very true, because at that point, the husband and the father is going a little crazy and stir crazy, wants to get out and get back to their normal life. The mother's feeling very protective of the child, And the father loves the child, but still wants to at least see a movie, gets to get his wife back. And so there's great drama and things like that. And they were brilliant in the way that they said, no, this is what we're going to investigate. We're going to find the drama there and have it be true, not be melodrama. And I thought they were brilliant at that.
I've heard you say that when you take on a project, there has to be, you have to be challenged by it in the sense that there has to be a risk for you, a risk of failure.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Unless I'm pretty certain that I can fail, I'm not happy. I'm not happy being comfortable with what I'm writing. It doesn't. I have to. I don't know. I'm trying to find a way to be miserable. I'm not. But unless I am really challenging myself, and I'm really troubled about what I'm writing, that I'm not happy.
So is that to suggest then that you're your own harshest critic, that you look back at stuff that you've done and go, well, I could have done that way better?
No, I have much harsher critics than myself.
Oh, is that right? Oh, good.
I'm really easy on myself. No. I love everything I do. Yes, of course, you look back at what you've done. I mean, I woke up, I guess it was about 6 months ago now, and I woke up and went, oh, that's what I should have done at the beginning of Crash. And
really?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I should have told Don Cheadle. I finally came up with a note that as a director could get him to where I wanted him to be in the scene. He was brilliant. But I was thinking what I was trying to get out of the scene, he would have gotten there so much quicker if I'd only thought of this. Oh yeah, I'm always doing that.
Good God. Okay, well, let's talk about your films. You mentioned Crash. Let's talk about $1 Million Baby first, because this was one that you developed the story. You were interested in the book that it was based on. You had done all the work. You were originally the director of it too, right? And then Clint Eastwood came along, and then he ended up directing it.
Yes.
What I have read suggests that that was cool with you, that you stepped aside.
It was my decision.
It was, yeah.
I co-owned the property, so I could decide what to do with it. And I'd run around with it for 4 years under my arm, trying to get someone interested in that or Crash, and no one was interested. Who could figure? I mean, the $1 Million Baby was a movie about girl boxing and euthanasia. Why this didn't suddenly grab hold of everybody and how, I don't know. But and Crash was this strange project, which wasn't the sort of a shapeless project about race and class in Los Angeles, and with no central characters. And so, for some reason, I believed in these two and ran them around. I finally got the funding to do Crash, and it started that. And at the same time, had identified who I wanted for $1 Million Baby.
Yeah.
And we were just looking for the Frankie part. And the fellow who co-owned the rights with me came to me and said, "What about Clint Eastwood?" I said, "Well, he's brilliant. He'd be great for it. He's going to want to direct, though." And he went, "No, he's not." I said, "Okay, send the script." So he did, and he read it and called back 2 weeks later. Not to me, but to my co-producing partner. And he said, yes, he likes it very much. He wants to know if he can direct. To which I said, no, let him find his own fucking script. and then my agents and my producers...
You said this to yourself.
Yes. And which my agents and producers all sort of just came down upon me and said, Paul, stop. If Clint Eastwood directs your script, it'll make your career. I went, I don't want that decision. That's a terrible decision to make. And then I thought about it, and I talked to my wife, and she said, you're already directing Crash. Don't be greedy. And he'll do a really good job, won't he? I went, yeah, he'll do a really good job. I'll be jealous. He'll do such a good job. And I said, yes. I thought about it over Christmas while I was taking a break from Crash. I said, yeah, I should absolutely. I'd be honored to have him do it. And so he did. And he did a fabulous job.
Look how it turned out. Yeah. Now, Crash, on the other hand, this was, and you've told the story many times, and I'll get you to tell it again because it's certainly worth it. But because, for me at least, what's so interesting is the understanding of how long an idea can rattle around inside a writer's head before it actually turns into something on the page. But back in '91, I gather you and your ex-wife were carjacked by a couple of kids with a gun. Is that right?
Yes.
And that was the germination of the idea.
Well, I just didn't know it was an idea at the time.
Yeah.
I didn't know for 10 years that I was going to write about it. I just woke up in the middle of the night, started thinking about these kids and wondering. I just kept, every few months, I'd wake up wondering who these kids were, who put their guns in my faces, who stole that car. And I think it's that curiosity that gets a lot of us in trouble. And luckily, the trouble I got, I didn't go looking for them. I just decided to write about them. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to write a story from their point of view? So I started doing research. and talking to people and reading as much as I could. And the initial idea was when I woke up, I started writing about them, and then I've been thinking and been wondering about how we interact in Los Angeles, which is not well, and how Los Angeles is a microcosm of all American and all Western cities now. At least it's the way it's going. We're becoming more and more isolated from our neighbors, and we're finding ourselves in these cocoons of metal and glass.
Which is how it starts, with Don Cheadle saying that very thing, right?
Exactly.
We crash into each other.
Yeah, just to feel something. And I think that's true. I think, oddly, and that's a wonderful thing with being a writer. You can come up with these crazy ideas and just, put them on paper and make actors say them, and people suddenly start going, maybe that's true. So I just followed the characters and said, who did they bump into? Because I'm also fascinated with the way that we interact and the way we collide with strangers. And the fact that I think we need the touch of strangers to feel human. And that's why I feel more human in New York, for example, than I feel in Los Angeles or in Toronto than I would feel, driving in the suburbs of London, Ontario, or something. We need the brush we need that human contact of some sort. And so I just followed these characters and found out who they bumped into and started telling their stories. It all came out together in one evening. And I shoved it aside. I thought it was a TV show. I couldn't sell it. Tried several times to sell it. Even Sidney Pollack was interested in doing a TV show too with me, and tried to sell it with him and couldn't. And then finally my wife suggested I do it as a movie. And so I called up my friend Bobby Moresco. This was just after I finished writing $1 Million Baby and sitting alone in a room for a year. And Bobby'd come in to read my script and give me some advice at the end. And I said, listen, I've got this outline, these 25 pages in outline. Would you like to write a script with me? He read them and went, well, it's not a movie. I said, yeah, but I think it is. And so we did. We just wrote the outline. We did it in just a couple of weeks. Yeah. And then rewrote it, of course. And
do you do a lot of that? A lot of rewriting?
Oh, yes.
Yeah?
Yeah, I rewrite a lot. Hate rewriting, but do it a lot. But I'm constantly working on my stuff. I mean, just by the time I finish a first draft, there's usually 20 drafts involved in that before I let anybody read it. I'll let someone read a scene here and there, usually my wife. But yeah, no, I know when my work isn't working, which is most of the time.
Yeah. But I'm curious about the writing, directing, internal collaboration, I guess, if you want to call it that it has to go on. Because when you were talking earlier about, here it is years later after Crash, and you wake up in the middle of the night with an idea of how you could have gotten a scene to work quicker than it did. When you're on the set directing, but it's also material that you've written, does that make it easier, or does it create more paths down which you go that could end up being blind? I
think it makes it both easier and harder to have written something that you're then going to direct. When you've written something and then you have to put it on the screen, what often happens is you have the shortcut of knowing the motivations of the characters. Mm-hmm. But often you haven't really done your homework as a director. You haven't really looked and asked the questions of why does this character act this way. You just know it. Because a lot of stuff I write just comes from the gut, some instincts. I know why a character is doing this because it feels right for the character. Then you have to explain that to an actor, because often, if the writing is any good, the character will be doing the opposite of what the character is saying, and the actor will come in and just do what the character is saying, and you go, no. They feel the opposite. They're saying I love you. Well, in fact, they hate the person. They go, really? Yes. Why? I go, I don't really know.
That's right. You've never articulated it.
No, I haven't. Yeah. And so it takes a while. And so I now have the confidence, rather than just bullshitting and going, you know what, I don't really know. Let me think about that for a second. I just know it's important that's the way it is. And they'll have to go off and I'll have to think about it. And I go, well, I think this is the reason. Hopefully there's a rehearsal process, which usually there isn't, in which you can get through that. Yeah. But oftentimes you're stuck in the set and why is this line important to be said this way? I'm not really sure. And then see if to dig in and figure it out. Hopefully that doesn't happen that often.
Seriously.
You really shoot really, really slowly if that's the case. And in my films you can't. You have to shoot quickly because our budgets tend to be low. But,
I want to talk about the next film, in the Valley of Elah, which you did. Because what did surprise me was that despite your success at the Academy Awards, with both $1 Million Baby and with Crash, you still ended up not having enough clout to get that one made, and again, your connection to Clint Eastwood was what paid off. Talk about that a little bit.
In the Valley of Elah was a difficult project from the beginning because I started a couple of years into the war, and no wanted to do a movie about the Iraq War while we're in it, especially developing it at that point, because everyone at that time, not everyone, but the great majority of Americans were backing the war. And I wasn't, and others weren't, but they weren't going to bet against the American public.
Yeah. Well, in fact, you have told a story, I think in the Progressive magazine, you told about putting a sign on your own lawn after the invasion of Iraq. Talk about that, because that's astonishing to me.
Yeah, when we invaded Afghanistan, I started demonstrating in the streets, and would get signs that said "War is not the answer," and I'd put them on my front lawn, and routinely those signs would be ripped up or spray painted, and or I'd find them, with literally desecrated, and that was disturbing because I was living in what I thought was a very liberal community of Santa Monica, and which is a very liberal city in a very liberal state. And I thought, my God, if this is happening here, if these signs won't last more than a couple of days in my neighborhood, what's happening to the rest of the country? But yes, every week that sign would be ripped up. And then when we invaded Iraq, of course, there was more demonstrating more often in the street, and I'd get different signs and put them up, and they were ripped down. And I remember driving down the street with a bumper sticker that said "War is not the answer," and people would drive up beside me and start screaming at me. And,
really?
How could you think that? How can you say that? What is the answer, Mr. Wise Guy? And luckily, being a screenwriter, I don't come up with the answers to the questions. So,
I'll get back to you.
Exactly. But
can I have your own number?
Yeah, but it was a scary time here. People forget that. We were all in lockstep. We all knew that this was the right thing, that there were weapons of mass destruction, that there was this heinous villain over there, and we had to go stop him out because he was behind 9/11. We all knew this. Of course, none of it was true. Well, the fact that he was a heinous villain, of course he was, but there are so many heinous villains that we support around the world. And so I'd ask my friends. Actually, this went back to the first Gulf War. That's what I wrote a series called Easy Streets, and that was started by the first Gulf War, because a lot of my friends, liberal friends, would be saying, we really do have to invade Iraq. I go, I'm sure we do. Why? Well, this guy's a heinous guy. He's a horrible guy. He's a terrible monster, and he's killing his own people. I said, yeah. If you notice, we provided the gas that he's actually killing his own people with. You know that, right? And he goes, well, that's here, there. And I said, it got down to the fact that he looked like a villain. That's really what it was. It was easy to sell because he had a big mustache, he had pockmarked skin, and his skin was not white. So it's really quite easy to point and go, that's a villain. And I said, okay, I'm going to do a TV show which is going to convince you that this is a hero and that's a villain. And so you're really comfortable with that, and I'm going to go, yeah, watch this. Now he's the hero and he's the villain. Now watch this. He's the hero, here's the villain. And that was a lot of fun to do. No one watched it. It went immediately. But I did it in the form of a cop show. Yeah. And had the cops and the criminals, and I really enjoyed doing that. And so that is another thing. It's sort of, as people who live in the Western world, we really are myopic. We really see the world through. It's not even blinders. We see them through the vision of what our folks tell us on the TV set and the newspapers, and we don't investigate much deeper than that. We barely read a newspaper. If our journalists aren't really journalists anymore, at least most of them. There's a few great journalists. Most of them aren't. They just repeat whatever the White House says or whatever they say in Parliament. They just say it, and then we go, oh yes, that must be true. And so their parroting becomes, we mimic their parroting, and that's what we believe. So I thought it was very important for artists to start to ask those questions. And a lot of artists have been asking those questions, and that's how we came to in the Valley of Elah. I really wanted to ask some really important questions at that time. Not necessarily what's happening to them, but what's this doing to us? What's it doing to our beautiful men and women who are sending off to war, who go there thinking that they're David, gone to fight the Goliath, only to quickly discover they're Goliath. How do you live with that? Being a good man, being a good woman, being a young man or woman, and how do you make these terrible choices that I couldn't make on a daily basis? And so, since I couldn't answer those questions, I thought it would be good to make a movie about that. Yeah. I knew no one would come to it. I knew no one would see it, but also I had to do it.
I read that when the script was finally sent off to Clint Eastwood, your fear was that he would say, "You commie bastard, I never want to talk to you again." When in fact that wasn't his reaction at all.
No, Clint's an amazing man. And every time you think you know who he is as a human being or politically or whatever, he will surprise you. Because he had very strong feelings about this war, and they were not pro. And so he wasn't sure if he wanted to play that character, but he really wanted me to be able to say what I wanted to say. And he's been a great supporter of mine and a wonderful friend.
Yeah.
In fact, he just sponsored a school. We have this series of schools in Haiti that we build in the slums, and he just sponsored one for me and for us. And but he's always been a man who's thought independently. And that's why I admire him so much, and that's why I took the project to him.
I got to ask you, though, something about that particular movie, because as the movie went along, it got, I don't want to say fuzzier, it got grainier and grainier as it went along.
That was quite literally grainier.
That was intentional.
I added grain all the way through,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, I thought I'd make a movie. I like movies that are hidden in other films. And so I said, okay, it needs to be entertaining. So what is it? Well, it's a murder mystery. We all understand that. And it's about this great detective who is going to go find what's happened to his son. And we all know he's a great detective because we see him being a great detective. And he solves crimes, solves clues and things that the others can't quite easily. So we know if we stick with this man, he will get to the truth. And it's a story about hubris. A story about that pride that we as Americans believe that if we apply ourselves, we can get to the truth. And I said, well, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to fool you, because it's not a murder mystery. You're going to find out that the solution is obvious. He just can't see it. We see it before he does, and then we're going to be really disturbed because we have this great detective, and we're smarter than he is. Everyone around is smarter than he is. Why is he? And it was a story about how pride can blind you, and how you often it's much more difficult to see the truth than one would think. And it's and the truth was staring him right in the face the entire time. He went searching for who did this, only to discover that he did it. He was responsible. And that's what I wanted to say about us, is that we don't have to point fingers. We're responsible. I'm responsible, just as responsible as the person beside me. We're all responsible for not stopping that. And so we can't point fingers now. We can't go with that terrible George Bush nonsense. We were all in lockstep. We wanted to believe that. We have this mentality that we know best, and we can stride through the world and fix things. We should have a little humility. And that's what he finally discovers, is a little humility.
We've got a couple of minutes left, and there are two things that I wanted to ask you about. But coming out of this, because you're talking, people will go, wait a second, no, isn't this guy Canadian? And you have said you're proud to be a Canadian, but you identify with America and Americans.
Well, I'm very proud to be a Canadian. I grew up there, and I was there for the first 22 years. I'm now 56, so I've lived here for 30-odd years. And I think my politics, even when I grew up in Canada, were formed by America, as much of our politics are in Canada.
Yeah.
And I grew up seeing the demonstrations, seeing the riots, and I knew I wanted to be a part of that. I didn't know what part I wanted to play, but I knew that there were important decisions being made. There were important things happening, and so thank God Canada is more at peace with itself. America is not, and so I guess since I'm not at peace with myself, I wanted to be a part of that chaos that was in the streets, and the chaos that is so deeply and easily hidden under the surface of normality.
It's never gone away since in the last 40 years.
No. When Crash came out, I was roundly vilified, mostly by liberals. Some, well, actually, the right and the left both hated it because they said, people in Los Angeles said, how can you say there's a race problem in Los Angeles anymore? Maybe 10 years ago, fine. We had the riots, things, but 10 years ago, fine. But look, everyone's getting along well, and there was... Okay, that same week that I was criticized, there was a big clash at one of the high schools with the gangs, and at the same time, when I was doing the research in this, I'd go to my friends and say, you know what, I was down in South Central last week, and I doing some research, and I found this great little jazz club. Let's go down there this weekend. They went,
South Central?
Are you out of your mind?
Yeah.
I said, it's not like they have horns, for Christ's sake. It's just over there. It's the other side of the freeway. I couldn't get one of my friends to go with me. Not one.
But these are the people who are saying everything was fine.
Everything's fine. Everything's fine, basically. And so, yeah, we love to think as liberals that we have solved the world's problems, and we are good people. So, of course, we don't have, we aren't racist. And of course, we don't consider ourselves as members of certain classes, and some classes are below us and above us. Because we have to consider ourselves good people to survive. That's what I like to inspect.
Yeah.
I like to hold the mirror up to myself and to my friends.
Let me ask you finally then, in our last couple of seconds here, about Haiti. Mm-hmm. You've been involved in a lot of social causes outside
Yes.
of your work. The earthquake happened in Haiti. You were one of the first guys, when that big fundraiser happened, you were one of the guys that was on screen talking about it. You've gone down there, you were talking about schools earlier, and then you directed the new version of We Are the World and have done that thing. Was it fun?
It's a lot of fun. It's chaos.
Yeah. It was chaos.
Yeah.
A lot more singers than the first one, right?
Yeah, 3 times as many. I've been curious about Haiti for quite a few years, and I finally went down there a couple of years ago to meet this man that I had read about, this doctor and priest and community organizer, who seemed like he was doing miraculous things with almost no money in the slums of Cité Soleil. And he was not only building schools and he built a hospital and an orphanage, but he delivered all the water to the slums, free water, and he negotiated all the hostage releases because he was the only everyone who trusted. And I had to go meet this man, so I flew down there and stayed with him for a week. And he took me through the slums every day, and we talked. And I fell in love with the place. The first day there, I've told the story before, the first day there, you know, if you just drive by the slums, all you can feel is pity. You get out and you walk, especially with someone like Rick. You see the true horror of what is there. And first day I didn't speak much. Second day in the slums, I started interacting with some of the people, even in my pidgin French. Third day I woke up with a smile on my face, which is a goofy smile that wouldn't leave me for the rest of the trip, because I felt the joy from these people. It was just permeated my soul. And I'm a selfish bastard. I wanted that fix, and I keep going back to get that fix because these people are so brave and they are so smart, and they are so funny and witty and you know, and some of them are just absolute bastards, but they live in such extreme conditions, and they somehow survive, and yet they create art and they create joy, and there's things that we've lost that they know, and that's not, I'm not to say that, you know, it's to be naive and say that, you know, wouldn't it be lovely to go back to the days where we all, you know, had much simpler lives and had fewer trappings around us, but at the same time, these trappings don't make us happy. And so to go back and to work with them, and we've been building schools ever since, and then the earthquake happened, and we knew people on the ground, so we were able to mobilize quite quickly and raise more money and have a really effective board that's building schools and supporting the children's hospital there in the slums and supporting Father Rick's programs.
Well, congratulations on that, and for the fact that you're here in this establishment editing a feature film and the We Are the World video, for you to take this time out to talk to us is greatly appreciated.
The next 3 days will be finished in sometime in the fall, I guess, so hope everyone can see it by then.
Thanks a lot for doing this, Paul. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Will work better when you bring people together.